Okay, good morning, guys. I wanted to jump on and have a little talk about the competition coming up this weekend, this tournament, the Mutant Weekender in London, which I'll be attending, and I'm very much excited for. So I just wanted to take a chance to talk about some of my meta ramblings, reflect on the last video, and talk about what my list is at the moment in response to the meta. So the data that I take is always from rated games from the last sort of 3 months. The previous video I did the last 6 months because I wanted a bit more of an overview of the year. So this is all pretty much since WTC, what's been winning. We can see the things that we'd expect. Hellfire, Namor, Sam Wilson doing quite well the last couple of months. Storm and Baku, Convocation, Loki, all this sort of stuff that we'd expect down on the lower end. Miles, Guardians, Daredevil, and sort of just in that middle pack, we've got those quite heavy attrition lists: Loki, Red Skull Cabal, Inhumans, Kingpin, Dormammu, and APOC, Midnight Suns. And that's really interesting. A lot of people talk about Red Skull Cabal and Webs being some of the biggest terrors of the meta. But they're actually sitting at a cool, calm 56% and 52% respectively. And actually, Hellfire, Namor, Sam are the big things that we really need to be able to beat consistently. I also thought I'd pull the sort of number of games played, rated games played, to see what's likely to come up. Now, Asgard is, of course, very, very popular. Kingpin Crims, surprisingly popular as well. APOC and Midnight Suns, really up there. Miles and Guardians. So they're the sort of ones that I'm really expecting to see. And the ones that I'm expecting to really give me trouble are Hellfire, Namor, Sam Wilson. I also thought it'd be really interesting to look at the sort of top one or two players in affiliation and see what their win rate with their chosen affiliation is. So what we've got here is looking at the number one sort of Hellfire player and what their win rate is and their number of games is. And that sort of gives you a really good idea of what the skill ceiling is on these different lists, right? So a good Hellfire player is going to be winning sort of 93% of their games, and then sort of dragged down to a bit of a lower average here. The other notable ones, Storm. This guy is kind of cracked. I remember him. I've not met him, but I remember looking at his profile. 19-1. He'd had one loss. That's including playing at WTC, playing recently. So this guy, while it's a fairly small sample size, is on a bit of a hot streak. Same with Kingpin Crims, 20 games, just one loss. So that's another one where surprisingly there's this really high skill expression. And Baku, similar one. I think a lot of people don't know what Mbaku's up to, including myself. So I can see why that would catch people off guard. Miles, this is understandably why people point out Webs as being a potential problem. Granted, this guy hadn't played Webs in a little while, and I'm wondering if the shift in sort of meta towards high attrition will change it. But Miles will win 90% of the games that you let him. And then Guardians at 90% as well. That one really surprised me. I wouldn't have expected them to be up there. And then Daredevil Defenders as well. This is probably the biggest swing in win rate of skill expression. We've got 48% as a base win rate, and 91% Mr. Eric Wong over in America doing the Portal Defenders thing very effectively. So what sort of overall things are we seeing for themes of counterplay? I think being able to play fast, right? If we go back, looking at these teams, Namor's likely to have a safe grab or two potentially in shield. Same with Storm. Hellfire are just going to be tanky enough to sit on the point. Convocation are going to be bumping backwards. Kingpin Crims are going to win on the points quite early from round one. Same with Miles on sort of Scoundrels. So these sort of teams with the really high win rates that we're pointing out on the scoring side are going to try and get quite an advantage on turn one and then continue that through and sort of win on turn three, maybe turn four. So I think being able to play fast, have sort of turn one openers that you're confident with, being able to chase and catch the scoring teams, and then Thor management. If we look at sort of the Loki, even the Red Skull Cabal, this kind of applies to, even though it's not directly Thor, but managing the sort of really high damage pieces like Zemo or Thor. Same with Inhumans. If we want to be beating those sort of mid-pack teams, it's going to be about managing the damage. Even Dormammu, surprisingly up there, but managing those high damage pieces. And then counter to defensive rerolls. So looking at Namor and Webs, if they're rerolling a ton of dice, it's likely to be a relatively easy win for them with their defensive bubbles. So making sure that we can get through sort of Lifesaver, get through the Invaders rerolls. So this is my list. This is what I'm going to be running at the Mutant Weekender, and I'm quite excited for. So we've got Wong, Daredevil, Namor, Shang-Chi. That sort of builds a bit of a defender's core. And then we've got Strange, Sorcerer Supreme, Voodoo, Ancient One, Magic for a Convocation core, and then just powerful splash pieces with Immortal Hulk and Ebony Maw with the Space Gem. So we've kind of got this like half defenders, half Convocation side of things. Tactics cards, we'll go through this bit by bit, right? So what I really like about this core is that we kind of have two really strong 15s with either Magic, Strange, or Hulk. If I'm on sort of into Red Skull Cabal and I just need to be able to control, I can trade Magic for Zemo, and then Strange and Hulk can normally control out Thor, control out Thanos quite effectively. Or I've kind of got this the top half of the top four characters form a really strong 15 if I'm playing into Asgard, because I have two fairly reliable staggers. I've got those offensive rerolls, and I can use the portal setup to make sure I can hit them and they can't hit me for at least a turn or two. And that normally is enough to sort of swing the game. That plus the staggers means that Thor's going to be getting maybe 4 attacks in across the whole game, and I should be getting a few more, being able to swing it that way. We've also got a strong sort of 19 plan for portals, which can be for intrusions, which can be a big problem for Convocation normally. So Strange, H1, Magic plus Hulk. Every model that I have can place themselves back onto a portal, teleport to where they need to go, and double tap and teleport away. So again, creating that sort of theme where I should be able to hit my opponent and they shouldn't be able to hit me. In terms of the scoring things, I can build out a Convocation team with Voodoo as a core and Namor as a splash. And I get these two really nice objective drops. And that means that I can run potentially Magic and Wong. That's a 14 threat core. I can splash what I need. So something like Senators, I can bring that core plus a splash of a Shang-Chi. And I can be sitting, or plus a splash of, I don't know, Strange even. Be running pretty happy on that. Tactics cards were really the tight point in terms of fitting defenders into this list. I'll start with the really essential ones. I obviously want Bar with No Doors. For me, running Convocation, I think you need to be running Planar Poldak, Oliver Agamotto, and the Ironbound books. Let me just reformat that quickly. Yeah, that looks a bit better, doesn't it? So Bar with No Doors, Planar Poldak, Oliver Agamotto, and Ironbound books. Super important for that Convocation shell. Orb of Agamotto allows Strange to place up on round 1 and get some attacks. Planar Poldak is the Convocation Dark Rain, which is just so useful to have those sort of like more reliable dice into a target on turn 1, maybe turn 2, but definitely by turn 3 to try and put somebody down where you need to put them down. The books are a really big deal, especially where I'm running these sort of characters that can get a lot of mileage out of the books in Magic, in Ancient One, and in Strange. And then we look at sort of character-specific cards. We're looking at Chi Mastery and One Below All. Most of the time, I'm going to be putting either Hulk or Shang-Chi on the table. Very rarely they'll both be there, but that sort of helps fill out a fourth slot of a strong character card. And then I've got Brace and Patch Up. Patch Up is excellent with Immortal Hulk because once he flips, I should just be able to patch him up again and bring him back to his non sort of effectively dazed side. Brace for Impact, really important if you're playing Convocation because we are fairly squishy to throws. And it's also the reason why I bring these big tanky characters with good throws like a Hulk or like an Ebony Maw, who's a little bit less tanky but still has that really powerful terrain clearing ability. I ran Magneto in Convocation for a while, so Brace super important. And then the last two cards that we haven't sort of spoken about is Mystic Ward and Portals, as pentagrams. I think these are just the strongest two generic Defenders cards. I've seen Cover Me get a fair bit of play, and I do think that's good in a full Defenders list, but I'm not going to be using that sort of every game that I play Defenders, whereas Mystic Ward is pretty much always going to have some use, and Portals is pretty much always going to have some use, even if I'm just sort of rescuing Namor from, a side where he's gone off to bully a 3-threat, he's killed the 3-threat, and then I want to bring him back toward the rest of my team. Crisis. So I wanted extracts that I could play very effectively with Convocation. If I'm off of Prio, it's more likely that I'm going to be running with my extracts, and it's more likely that I'm going to want things that I can go even with, like on Senators or Fear Grips. Senators is really nice, it leaves people in the middle. Fear Grips have got some really nice play where Ebony Maw can walk and steal their home hammer, which if people don't see coming can just sort of win me the game on round 1, as I can get so far ahead with that attrition and on the scoring quite quickly. Montesi is a bit of a funny one, but this was diving into the data of my own games and convocation games generally. And I think just the slow scoring down the middle is quite effective. That's the one that I'm least confident on, just for myself as a player. It might be better off being scrolls at 20 threat to allow me to go a bit of more threat, more toys is generally better for convocation. However, 3 physical defense, I have been burned every now and then by just being pulled across to the enemy side of the board with senators, and I don't really have an effective safe grab other than Namor. Although I can bring Namor at 20 threat, so or Ebony Moore isn't a safe grab as well. So maybe that changes to be scrolls. Maybe that'd be better. Then secures. I'm thinking if somebody's actively picking their extracts, they're a scoring team, they're a webs, potentially an X-Men, and I want slow scoring secures. I'm also really quite comfortable on these sort of fighty maps against these fighty teams. 17 threat is the sort of the one I like the least. If I get prior, choose my secures, land on 17, and go into sort of an Asgard on 17, that's tricky. But I think we're both just in a situation where we're running a strong 15 threat plus a wall, plus a 2 threat. Gamma, I'm super happy with that. I'm happy with Gamma Researcher. I think that the bump's ability to put me out of range of double taps, or the portal play, or the convocation mode with iHulk is very strong down the middle. And intrusions is probably one where I'm most confident on. I think I've got an 80% win rate on intrusions or something like that, with this sort of current core of being able to have that sort of convocation plus iHulk. So I think it's a very effective place for me to be. The weak points of the lists, I think, are Sword Base versus X-Men or Sword Base versus Hydra. They tend to score so fast, and I've been really struggling to keep up with that. Where I have only one 3 threat and only one 2 threat, I can't go 5 wide at 15. So Sword Base can be a really tricky one. I think the Defender's Mirror and the Midnight Sun's Mirror might be really difficult just because of this big boy here, the iHulk. If they're bringing an iHulk and getting more mileage out of them than I am, then I think the game could be really tricky. But, I need to get more reps on that. One can potentially remove the stagger from iHulk. But we'll see. I think Midnight Sun's generally going to be quite tanky into my mostly mystic and physical list. I've got very little energy attacks. So, they won't. I won't auto fold to them, but surviving those Siege of Darkness turns can be quite scary. That's what I think. If we just go back to reflect on this again, I think I'm confident into Hellfire because I can chase them down. I have mystic attacks for sort of Bill and for Namor if they bring him, and for Lizard I should be able to remove those pieces quite effectively. Into Namor's shield, it's a case of just bringing iHulk and making sure that he can sort of do the bunker busting thing. Strangers or Daredevil's area attacks are quite effective as well, so I can kind of be quite happy on either the Convocation or Defenders mode. For Sam Wilson, I think Magic is a really effective trade piece, and I think Strange is really effective as well. A little bit nervous about the sort of sheer volume of sort of range for push attacks similar to Webs, but hopefully on a book's turn, being able to get ahead on turn 2 enough, that should be fine. Storm, I think I'm fine, basically, unless I land on Sword Base, as the 50-50 on the flip, with them going sort of 5 wide at 15 with Nightcrawler can be really, really difficult. So I think most of the time, unless I get a little bit unlucky with score with Crises, I should be fine. I should be able to just shoot through them. Mbaku, I have 0 reps into Mbaku, so I have no idea how that matchup plays out. But generally, because both of us go very fast, both the Wakanda and Convocation can play very, very fast. I think that's going to be a very interesting one. I'd love to get some reps on that. Asgard, I'm pretty confident that the Defenders mode can beat an Asgard list. Cabal, I think the Convocation iHulk mode can beat a Cabal list. Inhumans, I think iHulk can eat Black Bolt, and that can kind of just send them so far behind. Once they lose out on that high damage 5 threat, they don't have a leadership. They don't really have any effective character cards, so they'll maybe have one scary splash like a Thor that hopefully Doctor Strange can control out. Kingpin Crims, I think I can hopefully have enough damage to shoot through. APOC, I've had a really easy time with iHulk Strange. Just the amount of control I have from those 2 core pieces is easy. Midnight Suns, I need some more reps. Miles, super confident with Shang, Strange, Voodoo. We should be able to just remove the scoring teams. quite comfortably. Guardians can be really tricky if they're able to set up a big deadly duo turn, particularly with Yondu on the horizon. But I'm not too worried about that now. It's just make sure that I can manage deadly duo. And I have lost to a Ghost Rider with 2/2 threats. That felt quite tricky to solve that puzzle. But I think it's just a case of killing Ghost Rider, getting Deal with the Devil off the table and killing him again. I do bring enough damage to bear. I was trying to be a bit too clever with it before, I think. Defenders is a great matchup for Convocation, but a pretty poor matchup for Defenders. So, the Defenders mirrors, you have like Shang-Chi and Daredevil's just hitting each other for 0 damage. But hopefully the Convocation Mystic attacks should be fine. And then foes, I've got quite a few reps with my brother plays quite a few foes, so fairly confident with that list. It can occasionally get away on the scoring on a pay to flip, but most of the time it should be fine. So I was going to go into opening gambits, but I want to keep this video fairly short. So let's work through it pretty quick. Actually, let's see how we go. So if we jump into the mod, I've got the team. So if I just bring 1, 2, more and more. So one can obviously be involved in a lot of these, but let's activate these guys. Level or Fragamote. That's sort of the core of what you can set up. Let's bring one in actually. My 29 threat roster. So these are sort of all the characters that I think are really relevant for having opening plays. And we'll just go through sort of what they can do on turn 1. So the first two that we can sort of chat about is Namor and Ebony Maw, who are both safe grabs. Ebony Maw with the Space Gem is able to place himself forward, get onto the midline, with a walk, and then he can walk back. He can interact with anything that's on that midline there, and then he can walk back as well afterwards. So he's quite good for that. Namor, obviously, long move, 2 power, medium base. It's great to be able to pick up with him, potentially walk back to a side B, or back to your home D, or E if you're playing on one of those sort of maps. And he can sit there with the 1 power left on him, so that the following turn he gains up to charge power with the extract. So they're sort of my relevant safe grabs, both at very high threat, but I like that they contribute a lot after their turn 1. I struggle to sort of really justify a sort of beast in X-Men play. For me personally, I don't like the idea that I'm bringing 3 threat just to grab something off the midline, then run back, and then maybe on turn 4 throw a character off of a point. I like the idea that both these guys can safe grab, and then when the time comes, they can get themselves back in quite effectively and throw quite a lot of dice. So that's those two. Voodoo is quite a nice counter on Senators if there's no safe grab. With a walk, he can range 3 to an objective on the midline, which means that in the event of like a toad or something, a walk and then a range 3 is quite a lot of range. He can get 1 attack, and with his ability to sort of gain a power off of the skull, he can go up from his 1. He can maybe get damage, maybe gain another 1, and he can do an objective drop on a 2 threat. And if he gets very lucky, he can do it on a 3 threat, which is very powerful to be able to pull off on turn 1. So I quite like that. He's also a fairly tanky boy to walk to a point. Bringing in the Wong plays, Wong unlocks quite a lot from my other pieces. If we just glance at the roster again, the number of characters that Wong can help enable. He can give Voodoo more power to make it more reliable that he's going to steal something. He can give Eye-Hulker power to be able to walk, jump, and pick up an objective. Namor and Shang-Chi are both chargers, so that's very effective. Ancient One is less good, but she's able to then walk, place herself range 2, and pick up an objective, and then hit. So basically a Wong action and handing a power enables Ancient One or Namor or Shang-Chi to get an attack instead. So I'm trading an action on a 2 threat for one of my higher threat characters. And of course, Wong also allows Strange to place himself range 4, turn 1. So lots and lots of things that Wong can enable in the team. But he also can set up the portals. And sort of the line with that is hopefully on an E map, somewhere in the middle, we can meditate and then walk, and then we're close to that E. we're going to gain. So we power phase turn 1, meditate in turn 2 power phase, we gain an extra power. You can set up the portals, range 1 from Wong. Hopefully there's a bit of a terrain, and I've built my little castle. Got something like Namor. Imagine I'd be more sort of a daredevil. I can sort of block out the point a little bit, hopefully with a bit of terrain to block out another bit. And then one can place the other end of the portal range 5 from him, so he's able to play quite far forward. But what I actually like to do is using sort of Shang-Chi charge range plus an advance, so the portal would land sort of somewhere here on the midpoint, meaning that Shang-Chi can charge, get to the point after a hit, punch again, and then teleport back. And Namor can do the same. He can charge, he can double punch, he can teleport back. And this creates this really nice dichotomy where my opponent, if they're on the midline on a gamma wave, has to sit there and tank attacks, but they have to move to punch into the bunker that I've got going. So that's Wong. That's the idea of portals. So I mentioned one of the things that Wong can set up is allowing Strange to place up on the midline, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier as well. But having Strange be able to place with Orb of Agamotto, I think, is a massively, massively big deal. He gains 3 power on the first turn, and he is able to then use that card to place himself up. And I'm effectively playing a card to get an extra attack action off of a 5 threat, which if he's able to double tap, he can potentially daze somebody. I've had it before where he's enemy characters on the midline on with an extract. 2 attacks from Strange can daze somebody. If they have at least 4 health, he can gain enough power. If they have 5 health, which is super common, he can gain enough power to take that extract and then place himself back, or place himself forward to a side D or something. So that sort of can put me in a situation where I've spent a card, and the ceiling on that play is I've spent a card to daze somebody turn 1 and effectively do a safe steal on an extract and bring my Strange either back, or if I'm feeling particularly ballsy, he can go on in forward again. I think the range that he's able to pull that off, and what you're able to do with him turn 1 is huge. So sort of that's Orb of Agamotto, and portals, and the sort of first 5 big opening plays. And then the other big opening play that I really like is just using iHulk to walk to the middle, particularly in mode Convocation. With a double move, he can stand in the middle. And I'm making a 7 threat walk twice on turn 1, which arguably isn't the best given the theory of the other guys. I want them doing stuff on turn 1. But particularly with Prio, iHulk is really safe to go turn 1, double walk to the middle, go pick up an extract, in fact, it's a little bit further back. So you can be about there to pick up an extract off the midline, right? And then most opponents will only be able to get 1 attack per model on turn 1. So he's double walked, he's got his 3 power, he's picked something up, he's on 2 power. Now, if he gets hit, he has this bump, which is a huge range. 1 bump almost gets him entirely the way back to a home D. In fact, let's look at that quickly. No, let's so from his home, you can do a walk. If there is that middle objective, he can walk again. And then if he takes any damage, he can bump back and be on the home E or the home D, which is just such a big deal. And then obviously the following turn, he's going to be gaining 3 power. He's got that objective, whatever it is. But he now has 1 below all and Gamma Leap online. So he can go ahead and go for a place, into another place, into double tap. Which means that turn 2, after being my safe grab, again, he's one of these pieces that can just be right up in the enemy's face, punching them. And that sort of range, if you choose to be a bit ballsy and keep him in the middle, 2 range 2 places can get him over to a side B. If there's a 5 threat that he wants to go and bully and daze immediately, he can use that place in that card to get a double tap and then build power and get a terrain throw. And he can basically threaten to anywhere in the map after he moves to the middle. And because he's got that 15 health, he's just pretty much never going to go down. Maybe Guardians could take him down with just a high volume of attacks. But yeah, iHulk opens up so much for these squishy wizards. There's also really nice lines where maybe I put my iHulk in the middle, maybe he takes quite a lot, 9 damage or so. He's fully powered up, and I actually decide what I want to do with him is I activate the books the following turn. So books are online, iHulk activates first. He gets some damage in, he rotates back, and then they've had some characters take damage and be thrown out the way. And then what I can do is I can rotate Strange up to hold that point, and under the book's turn he's going to be super tanky. Hoping I have Prio. Maybe I've done a Wong heal. The following turn I can then rotate Strange back and do a similar thing. Maybe I place somebody out off to Oblivion, and then I run Strange away, and I can then get iHulk back in onto that point. So I can create this really nice sort of in and out with these two models where both of them have a super high amount of control, a good bit of attrition, and they can just rotate in and out and tanking the enemy activations. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you guys see sort of where I'm coming from with this roster. I'm very excited to sort of stress test it. If I go, 0-6, I'll probably never show my voice on the internet again. But I think it's got legs, and I think I will catch at least one person off guard with some of the gambits this team has to offer. I'll speak to you guys after the event.